two mechanisms for oxygen transport in blood. The 90%, 97% of the oxygen is transported by binding with specific polypeptide by the name hemoglobin. And after binding, we have oxyhemoglobin. 97% of oxygen transported through oxyhemoglobin formation. And remaining 3% of oxygen is transported by a dissolved. And again, by that, I will talk about this. So, you know that at the level of the lung, means that inside of the pulmonary capillary, the oxygen pressure is very high and is about 104 millimeter of mercury. In pulmonary capillary, the oxygen inside of the pulmonary capillary increases from 40 to 104 millimeter of mercury. In this site, we have combination of the oxygen and hemoglobin. Opposite to this, at the level of the peripheral tissue, the location for using the oxygen by the cells. Here you can see that the oxygen pressure is low inside of the tissue capillary. If you remember, at the arterial end of tissue capillary, the oxygen pressure is 95 millimeter of mercury. At the another end, 40 millimeter of mercury. So at the same location, the oxygen pressure is 40 and is low. And here you can see that oxygen can release from the oxyhemoglobin. Can you tell me that how much hemoglobin you have inside of the blood? How much hemoglobin?
15 grams per 100 milliliters.
15 grams for each deciliter of the blood. 15 grams. You can see 15 grams of hemoglobin per each deciliter of the blood. But this is the first. The second, can you tell me that each gram of hemoglobin can bind by how much milliliter of the oxygen? Each 1 gram of hemoglobin can bind by how milliliter of oxygen?
1.34.
1.34. But when the hemoglobin is pure, in this condition, each gram of hemoglobin can bind by 1.39. But we have not pure hemoglobin inside of the blood. Very low percent of the hemoglobin is methemoglobin. Can you tell me that what is the methemoglobin? At first, you know the structure of hemoglobin. In each hemoglobin, we have how many polypeptide chain? You have 4 polypeptide chain. And for each polypeptide chain, we have specific biochemical structure by the name heme. At the center of the heme, you can see a specific metal. This specific metal is iron. Iron has 2 different charge. 2 positive charge or 3 positive charge. The 2 positive charge is named ferrous. And the 3 positive charge is named ferric. But in normal and healthy condition, we should have the ferrous type of iron inside of the heme, Fe2 positive, not Fe3 positive. But unfortunately, a very low amount of hemoglobin inside of the blood, unfortunately, has the Fe3 positive charge. And this type of hemoglobin is named methemoglobin. By methemoglobin, we cannot transport the oxygen. only by the Fe2 positive charge we can transport the oxygen. For this, briefly, you should know that in healthy and physiological condition, each gram of hemoglobin can bind by 1.34 milliliter of oxygen. So, and you know that in male, the hemoglobin is between 14 and 18 milligram per each deciliter for male. For female, is between 12 to 16. The average, all of this is 15 grams of hemoglobin each deciliter, in each deciliter. And you know that each gram of hemoglobin can bind by 1.34. So, if all of the hemoglobin is saturated, what's the meaning of saturated? Is binding by the oxygen. Binding of oxygen is the saturation of the hemoglobin. When the total hemoglobin is saturated, is binded by the oxygen, we can calculate the total amount of oxygen inside of the hemoglobin. But we have 15 grams of hemoglobin for each deciliter. And each deciliter can bind by 1.34. And I told that the total hemoglobin is saturated, means that here is 100%, means that the total. And by this you can reach to this point, means that 20.1 milliliter of oxygen can bind by total hemoglobin in each deciliter of blood. Why? Because in each deciliter of blood we have only 15 grams of hemoglobin. You can see here this calculation. But you know that we have two mechanisms for oxygen transport. What was this mechanism? Oxyhemoglobin and dissolved. Before I told about this, told that the oxygen uses two mechanisms for its transportation. At first, 97% of the oxygen binds by the hemoglobin and can form the oxyhemoglobin and can transport by this way. The remaining can transport using another way or mechanism or dissolve. How much? Only 3% of total oxygen can transport using the dissolved mechanism. Okay, so now I want to calculate the total amount of oxygen in venous blood and in arterial blood. Consider this as the peripheral tissue or peripheral cells. This peripheral tissue or cells has a specific capillary, peripheral capillary. This capillary from this end have an arterial blood, another venous blood. You know, before you look at this slide. Here the oxygen is 95. Here is 14. Okay, so now here I want to calculate the total amount of oxygen in each deciliter of arterial blood. Here we have arterial blood, and here we have venous blood. Now, Here I want to calculate total content, total amount of oxygen. You know that in blood we have two ways for oxygen transportation. The oxyhemoglobin and
this one.
salt. In oxyhemoglobin, at first I want to calculate the oxyhemoglobin amount. You know that we have 15 gram of hemoglobin. Each gram can binds with 1.34, and you should know that in arterial blood in normal and physiological condition, only 97% of the hemoglobin is bound by the oxygen, and the saturation in arterial blood in physiological condition is not 100%, is not total. 3% is less than total and is 97%. So 15 gram, each gram 1.34 and only 97%. By this calculation, you see that 19.5 milliliter of oxygen is bound inside of each deciliter of blood by hemoglobin. 19.5 milliliter. Remaining is dissolved. So 19.5 oxyhemoglobin. Another. In dissolved, you know that in arterial blood the oxygen pressure is 95. And again you know that the solubility or the solubility coefficient of oxygen in the previous session I talked about this is about 0.03. By this you can see that the amount of oxygen can dissolve in each deciliter of the blood is about 0.29 milliliter for each deciliter. And I can round this to 0.3. So 19.5 by oxyhemoglobin. 0.3 milliliter dissolved. Both of them is the total oxygen. 19.5 plus 3 is 19.8. 19.8 milliliter of oxygen each deciliter of blood artery. So inside of each deciliter of arterial blood we have 19.8 milliliter of oxygen. From 19.8 milliliter, 19.5 milliliter by oxyhemoglobin and remaining 0.3 milliliter as a dissolved. So you should know this amount. But another side, venous blood. In venous blood again we have oxygen in two forms. With oxyhemoglobin again and dissolved. Oxyhemoglobin. Again, we have the same amount of hemoglobin. How much? 15 gram. And each 15 gram and each gram of hemoglobin combined with 1.34. But here, the difference between venous blood and arterial blood is this. In venous blood, the saturation is about 97%. But in the venous blood, decreases to 75%. Okay? And I replace this 97% in arterial blood by 75%. By this, you reach to this amount, 15.1 milliliter of oxygen in each deciliter of hemoglobin in venous blood. Remaining is dissolved. For dissolved, again, I can use from this formula. But in venous blood, the oxygen pressure is not 95, it's very less, and it's 40. And here, 40 multiplied by the same, if using is the same solubility coefficient, O3. And here you reach to 0.12. And I can run this to 0.1. 0.1 as dissolved. 15.1 as oxyhemoglobin. And here, for each deciliter, 15.1 and is 15.2. Per each deciliter, milliliter of oxygen, each per deciliter, milliliter of oxygen per each deciliter. Tell me that. How much oxygen uptake by the tissue, or absorbed by the tissue, by each deciliter? In here we have 19.8, but here we see that the remaining amount of oxygen is only 15.2. How much? 19.8 minus 15.2 is the 4.6. 4.6 means that each deciliter of arterial blood can deliver the 4.6 milliliter of oxygen into the tissue, and remaining of oxygen in venous blood remains 15.2 milliliter per each deciliter. So this is like we can see this calculation. Means that the total amount of oxygen in each deciliter of arterial blood in both forms of oxyhemoglobin and dissolved is about 19.8. 19.8. From this 19.8, the 0.29 milliliter relates to dissolved parts. But in each deciliter of venous blood, you can see only 15.2 milliliter of the oxygen. And from this amount of oxygen, 0.12 milliliter relates to dissolved and remaining to oxyhemoglobin. And by this, we can calculate the amount of oxygen absorbed or delivered into the tissue. So, can you tell me that by this amount, calculate the utilization coefficient? Utilization coefficient.
Is it very low because only 4.6 milliliters per deciliter is distributed to the tissues from hemoglobin?
What is the first amount of total oxygen in each deciliter of the arterial blood? The total oxygen is 19.8 milliliter. From this amount, how much goes in the cells? 4.6. 4.6 is the amount of consumption, amount of usage. And by this, I can calculate the utilization coefficient, or the 4.6 divided by 19.8. And you can see to this value means that the 25% of total oxygen can use by the tissue. And is named utilization coefficient. Utilization coefficient. But during severe exercise, you can see that this value increases. This value is utilization coefficient. Increases to the large values, the big values, such as 75 to 85%. Before you know the right shift and left shift, I think, okay? At first, you know that we have a specific curve for oxyhemoglobin dissociation. Oxyhemoglobin dissociation means that when the oxygen wants to bind with hemoglobin or when the oxygen wants to release from oxyhemoglobin. This affinity for oxygen and hemoglobin is indicated by this curve. This curve is named oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve and is not linear and is a sigmoid shape, as it is sigmoid shape. In horizontal, you can see the pressure of oxygen. In vertical, you can see the amount of hemoglobin saturation. The amount of hemoglobin that can bind with the oxygen is the saturation. So here you can see that this normal value can shift to the left and upward and to right and downward. When it goes to up and left, we say that here we have shift to left. Opposite to this, when go to downward and twist right, we say that shift to right. Can you tell me that what's the meaning of right shift and left shift, or shift to right and shift to left? What's the meaning of this?
Left shift is when the
Depends on the affinity of
well, the oxygen, like the left side of the
from the capillaries, oxygen has to pick up oxygen and it go to the tissue. In the tissue, it has to release the oxygen.
Based on, according to the amount of affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen. Affinity is the tendency of the hemoglobin for binding, to bind with oxygen is affinity. Affinity is tendency, is love. Okay, by this we can talk about shift to left and shift to right. Means that when I tell that we have shift to left, means that the affinity of the hemoglobin increases to oxygen. Means that the oxygen cannot easily release from hemoglobin. Hemoglobin wants to have this oxygen and don't want to release this oxygen, want to attach, can take this oxygen. And in this situation, we say that we have shift to left. Opposite to this, in some condition, the hemoglobin wants to release oxygen and the affinity increases, the love increases, decreases, the affinity decreases, tendency decreases. And the hemoglobin wants to release this oxygen. In this situation, we say that the oxyhemoglobin has shift to right. So shift to right, affinity decreases. Shift to left, affinity increases. In shift to left, we have not oxygen release. Opposite to this, we have binding oxygen with hemoglobin, because the tendency and affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen is very high. Opposite to this, when the oxygen wants to release, we say that the oxyhemoglobin has the shift to right. Okay, so at the level of the lung or at the level of the alveolar space. In alveolar space, you know that the oxygen pressure is 104 millimeter of mercury. And here is a very good optimal location for binding of oxygen to hemoglobin. And here, in this location, the affinity of hemoglobin is very, very high and want to have this oxygen, want to absorb this oxygen. And here we say that at the level of the lung, we have the shift to left. Opposite to this, when this blood travels and passes through the peripheral tissue. The main function of this blood is that the deliver oxygen from itself to the tissue. And here, the tendency and the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen should be decreased. Okay? And here we say that we have right shift or shift to right. Okay, so in the two sides, we can see the right shift and left shift. At this level of the blood, we have left shift. At the level of the tissue, the location for oxygen usage by the cells, we have right shift. Okay, so we can see that different factors affect the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. For example, the amount of carbon dioxide can determine the affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen. For example, when the concentration of carbon dioxide is very high, this high amount of carbon dioxide can change the affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen and leads to the right shift. Means that want to release the more oxygen from hemoglobin, and for this we say that the carbon dioxide want to have a right shift. Similar to this, the ion hydrogen, the temperature, the specific metabolite by the name is phosphoglycerol. This phosphoglycerol or 2 and 3 dephosphogylicerol. All of these want to decrease the affinity of oxygen, the hemoglobin to oxygen. And by another way, I want to talk this, that when this amount, this factor increases, leads to the low affinity of the hemoglobin and leads to the right shift. In right shift, what happens? The oxygen released from hemoglobin, and this oxygen can be used by the cells. For example, what happens during the exercise? During the exercise, the activity of the body increases. The metabolism increases. During metabolism, we have high amount of carbon dioxide production. We have high amount production of the hydrogen ion. The temperature of body during exercise increases. The production of metabolite by the name bisphosphoglycerol increases. All of these leads to right shift of the hemoglobin, and by this, the more oxygen delivered to the tissue for usage. Opposite to this, when the carbon dioxide concentration decreases, when the hydrogen ion decreases, when body temperature decreases, or when the amount of bisphosphoglycerol decreases, all of this leads to the left shift. And by left shift, the affinity of hemoglobin increases. Here we can see this shift to right and shift to the left. But between them, you can see a specific effect by the name Ball effect. Actually, in fact, the Ball effect is the effect of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion on affinity of hemoglobin. Briefly, the effect of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion on affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. Before, hold that the high amount of carbon dioxide and high amount of hydrogen leads to shift to right. Carbon dioxide concentration increases. The hydrogen ion concentration increases. You know that when the hydrogen ion concentration increases, the pH or pH decreases. Here you can see the carbon dioxide concentration increases, pH decreases, means that the hydrogen ion concentration increases. Here we have the blue right shift, means that in this situation the amount of oxygen, the amount of released oxygen is more. Opposite to this, in the other side, you can see the effect of low concentration of carbon dioxide and low concentration of hydrogen ion. The effect of carbon dioxide and hydrogen in this curve, you can see that, is named Ball effect. Ball effect. Combination of hemoglobin with carbon monoxide. We know that unfortunately in war, specifically in Iran, unfortunately we have high rate of toxicity with or poisoning with carbon monoxide. Specific during the winter, when we use from different warmer such as heater and another similar warmer. You know that the binding site of carbon monoxide on hemoglobin is the same Fe2 positive charge. Fe2 positive charge. Told before, in each hemoglobin we have 4 polypeptides, 2 alpha, 2 beta, alpha 2, beta 2 in adult form. Each alpha and each beta attached with a specific biochemical structure hem. In hem we have Fe2 positive charge. And unfortunately, the carbon monoxide can bind by hemoglobin from this site, from this location, the location for oxygen binding. And unfortunately, the affinity of the hemoglobin for carbon monoxide is 250 times more than oxygen. 250 times more than oxygen. Okay, but you should know that when the carbon monoxide concentration increases in our environment and occupy the oxygen location in atmosphere, what happens? Unfortunately, we raise this carbon monoxide and carbon monoxide bind with hemoglobin and occupy the location of oxygen. And there is no free location for binding of oxygen on hemoglobin. And this situation is poisoning, is toxic, toxicity. But the first, when carbon monoxide bind with hemoglobin at first can occupy the location of oxygen, and the free location for oxygen binding decreases and decreases. And for this, the capacity and tendency of the hemoglobin for transport of oxygen decreases and decreases. The second effect of carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, unfortunately, wants to you know that on each hemoglobin we have 4 heme. 4 heme. Okay? Because we have 4 polypeptides, each polypeptide 1 heme. So we have 4 heme, and each heme have 1 Fe2 positive. So each hemoglobin molecule can travel 4 oxygen molecules. 4 oxygen molecules. Consider that by poisoning of carbon monoxide, 3 locations of this, for example, of heme is occupied by carbon monoxide. And only 1 location can bind with oxygen. Okay? But the location for oxygen decreases because the 3 position is occupied by the carbon monoxide. Another effect is the carbon monoxide increases the affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen. And by this, the shift right of the hemoglobin loss. And this hemoglobin cannot release oxygen. Carbon monoxide have 2 different effects. 1, occupy the location for oxygen. The second, increase the affinity of the hemoglobin to oxygen. And by this, lead to the left shift of the hemoglobin to oxygen, increase the affinity of oxygen, and by this prevents from oxygen release from the hemoglobin. Both of them leads to poisoning of carbon monoxide. For treatment of carbon monoxide, it's better we use from pure oxygen by high pressure. In hospital, in clinic, for treatment of this person poisoning carbon monoxide patient, at first we use the oxygen pressure, pure oxygen by high pressure. In addition to oxygen, a little we use from carbon dioxide. Why? Because carbon dioxide can increase the rate of respiration and the depth of respiration and lead to hyperventilation. Carbon dioxide leads to hyperventilation. So a very low amount of carbon dioxide and high amount of the pure oxygen is used for treatment of the carbon monoxide poisoning. The mechanisms for transport of the carbon dioxide. In peripheral cell, we have metabolism. During metabolism, we have production of carbon dioxide. At first, this carbon dioxide goes out of the cell and goes in interstitial fluid. Goes inside of the capillary. In the capillary, we have large amount of RBC, and inside of the RBC, we have the hemoglobin. We have three mechanisms for carbon dioxide transportation. The first, a low amount of carbon dioxide is transported through the dissolved form. How much? Only 7%. 7%. A part of this carbon dioxide is transported by binding with hemoglobin. Similar to binding of oxygen to hemoglobin, we have binding of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin. But the oxygen and carbon dioxide, the oxygen and hemoglobin, or binding of hemoglobin to oxygen, is named oxyhemoglobin. The binding of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin is named carbaminohemoglobin. The binding of carbon monoxide to hemoglobin is named carboxyhemoglobin. You have three names for oxygen, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide. Oxygen, oxyhemoglobin. Carbon dioxide, carbaminohemoglobin. Carbon monoxide, carboxyhemoglobin. So here, a part of this carbon dioxide is transported through carbaminohemoglobin, binding with hemoglobin, and remaining is transported through formation, through production of specific biochemical agents or bicarbonates. Bicarbonates. The 23% of total carbon dioxide is transported through carbaminohemoglobin, and remaining, or 70%, through the bicarbonates formation. But here you can see the 7% of this carbon dioxide puts or lies between the water molecules inside of the blood. And this form of location is named physical dissolved. Physical dissolved. Again, I repeat this. 7% of total carbon dioxide lies between water molecules. And the biochemical structure of the carbon dioxide is not changed. It's the same. And for this, we say that this part of transportation is named physical dissolved. Physical dissolved. And this part of carbon dioxide can induce pressure. Similar to we have for oxygen. Oxygen pressure is due to the dissolved oxygen inside of the blood. The binding of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin has not any pressure. The change to bicarbonate has not any pressure. Only pressure for each gas is from the physically dissolved in the water of the blood. So, 7% puts and lies between the water molecules and is named dissolved part. Remaining 93% of carbon dioxide goes into the red blood cells. 7% dissolved in plasma, and remaining 93% goes into the red blood cell. This 93% from this 93%, 23% bind with hemoglobin and produce the carbamino hemoglobin. And remaining 7% of this part indicates the carbamino hemoglobin. The remaining or 70% of carbon dioxide can produce bicarbonate at first, reacts with water and produce the acid carbonic. This acid carbonic itself can dissociate to bicarbonate and hydrogen ion. This bicarbonate is a form of carbon dioxide inside of the red blood cell. But you should know that in red blood cell of the venous blood, this bicarbonate goes out of the red blood cell and replaced by another ion by the name chloride ion. Here you can see this exchange. This bicarbonate goes out of the cell. Which cell? Our blood cell. In which part of the blood? Venous blood. But this bicarbonate is replaced by another anion. This anion is chloride. Chloride goes inside of the red blood cell. This phenomenon or this process is named chloride shift. Chloride shift is a process, is a mechanism during carbon dioxide transportation. Chloride shift. But here again, you can see that when the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, reacts with the water, you can see this reaction, carbon dioxide plus water. For this reaction, we need a catalyst. This catalyst is an enzyme by the name anhydrous carbonic. Anhydrous carbonic, you can see here. Anhydrous carbonic accelerates, increase the speed of this reaction. Which reaction? Reaction between water and carbon dioxide, and increase the rates and the amount of carbon dioxide, the bicarbonate formation. This anhydrous carbonic can increase the velocity, the speed of the reaction between carbon dioxide and water. How much? 5,000 times. Means that if I remove this carbon anhydrous here, what happens? We have this reaction, but it's very low speed. The amount of this reaction is very, very low. By presence of the carbon anhydrous, this reaction accelerated. This reaction catalyzes by the anhydrous carbon. So, here you can see the carbon dioxide dissociation curve. Similar to oxygen, you know that if again I indicated the peripheral tissue by this circle, okay. For this tissue, we have again capillaries. This side of the capillaries is arterial blood. Another is venous blood. You know that in arterial blood, the carbon dioxide pressure is 40 milliliters. At the venous, the carbon dioxide pressure is 45. So here we can see that each deciliter of blood, which blood? Arterial blood has 52 milliliters of carbon dioxide. Each deciliter of blood has 52 milliliters of Each deciliter of arterial blood has 48 milliliters of carbon dioxide. each deciliter of arterial blood has 48 milliliter of carbon dioxide. But in this part, you can see that each deciliter of venous blood has 52 milliliter of carbon dioxide. How much carbon dioxide is added to this deciliter of blood? 4. And you can see that during the metabolism of the cells inside of the tissue, we have production of the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide from the tissue goes into the blood, and by this can increase the total content, total amount of carbon dioxide. How much? 4. Because 52 minus 48 is 4 milliliter of the carbon dioxide. Means that each deciliter of blood can remove 4 milliliter of carbon dioxide from peripheral tissue. In here, you can see this calculated again. Oh, but similar to Bohr effect, we have another effect by the name Haldane. In Bohr effect, told that the carbon dioxide can change the affinity of the hemoglobin to oxygen and lead to left and right shift. More and the high amount of carbon dioxide leads to shift to right. Low amount of carbon dioxide shift to left. Opposite to this, we have for carbon dioxide, means that the oxygen concentration has an effect on carbon dioxide removal. This effect is named Haldane. Again, I want to repeat this. In Bohr effect, told that Bohr effect is the effect of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion on oxyhemoglobin curve. Effect of carbon dioxide on oxygen. But here, in Haldane, the oxygen has effect on carbon dioxide, opposite effect. Means that, to consider this, how much carbon dioxide is removed by each deciliter of the blood? 4. Again, you can see this alveolus. You can see this alveolus. In this alveolus here, we have again pulmonary capillary. At this part of pulmonary capillary, we have venous blood. Venous blood. In venous blood, we have 52 milliliter of carbon dioxide per each deciliter. Milliliter of carbon dioxide per each deciliter. Okay.
Yes.
But here we have arterial blood. In arterial blood, we have 48 milliliter of carbon dioxide per each deciliter. How much goes out of the blood? 4. Haldane is a scientist and indicated that when you know that inside of the alveolus, the oxygen pressure is 104. Oxygen pressure. Haldane indicated that when the oxygen pressure decreases inside of the alveolus, for example, we have decreased from this point toward the zero. Step by step, when the oxygen pressure decreases, the amount of carbon dioxide removing decreases and decreases. At the end, indicated this. When we remove all of the oxygen from the alveoli, oxygen pressure here is 0. What happened? We can see that only 2 milliliter of carbon dioxide can be removed. And the removing of carbon dioxide decreases to half. So why? Because the normal removing carbon dioxide should be 4 milliliter. 4 milliliter by a good and enough oxygen concentration is done. But when we remove the oxygen, this removing decreases to half. and the 52 reach to 50. And briefly, the Hallman say this, that for carbon dioxide removing at the size of at the location of the alveolar space, we need an oxygen pressure. By decreasing the oxygen pressure, the amount of carbon dioxide removing decreases and decreases. This effect is named the Hallman effect. Hallman effect. How much oxygen delivered to the tissue? How much oxygen? Oxygen delivered. Oxygen delivered. Oxygen delivered is about 4.6. You remember this. How much carbon dioxide removed? CO2 4. The ratio, this ratio, the amount of carbon dioxide removing to oxygen absorption or usage. This ratio is named the respiratory exchange rate. This ratio is named the respiratory exchange ratio. So, by this, you can see that this is 4 and this is 4.6. And by this, you can see that about the exchange ratio is about 0.8. Okay? But this ratio depends on the diet. This ratio depends on the diet. Means that the rate of carbon dioxide removing and rate of oxygen uptake is the same respiratory exchange ratio. Depends on the diet. Means that in normal diet we have different types of material. For example, carbohydrates, proteins, fats. In this normal diet, the ratio is about 0.8. But when we use alone carbohydrate in our diet, for example, glucose is C6H12O6 with 6 oxygen leads to 6 carbon dioxide. You remember this formation. What happened on the respiratory ratio? This respiratory exchange ratio increases and reaches to 1. Glucose plus 6 oxygen leads to ATP and 6 carbon dioxide. 6 carbon dioxide to 6 oxygen. 6 and 6 is 1. And this ratio is 1. By carbohydrates, alone diet, you can see that this ratio increases to 1. Opposite to this, when we use only fats in our diet, what happens? This ratio decreases to 0.7. Why? Because when the oxygen binds with the fats, we have production of water, no carbon dioxide. The water production, the carbon dioxide replaced by water. And for this ratio decreases to 0.7. But in normal and mixture of different diets, carbohydrate, protein, fats, you can see that this ratio is about 0.8. Regulation of respiration. I need 5 minutes rest. The time is 11:21.